Hi, and welcome to Global Student Voices, the podcast that brings you exciting stories and invaluable insights from students, educators, and thought leaders around the world. I'm your host, Coach Martin, with 30 years of experience in international education. Join us each time when we navigate the exciting journey between international secondary school and university. Let's get started. It's my pleasure to have Scott Hayden on the show, Director of Curriculum and Internationals at a school at International Community School in Bangkok. Scott has been serving in Thailand since 1996, so since the 1900s, as the kids say, as a teacher, leader, parent, and mentor. And this episode, we'll talk about raising third culture kids and just get to know each other. I'm very excited. You've had a very long career in one place, which is amazing to me, given how often international schools kind of run people over and chew them up. So I'm anxious to hear your wisdom in that regard. But I have to start at the most important thing, at least for me, and that's family. You've raised 4 daughters. I'm very excited to be grandfather to 2 little girls. And I'm curious, what is it you wish every international school parent knew about raising cross-cultural kids, TCKs?
Well, 4 daughters, 1 left at home. Oldest is married and teaching now, and 2 are in university. What I wish parents knew, man, the thing I've had to remind myself is that the things that bring me nostalgia might not click with them, because when I say home, they don't think of the place I think of. I mean, when I say home, I think of Northeast Pennsylvania up in the hills, but they think of a certain house that we've been in for like 20 years in the Bang Na district of Bangkok, Thailand, where almost all their memories are right there. Now, 2 of the girls were born there. The other 2 were young when we moved in. So we are unusual. But to parents of TCKs, your home might not match their home. And I grew up in rural hills surrounded by fields and forests. They grew up in suburbs, isn't quite the right word, but the outskirts of Bangkok. And so a big city and malls close by and a hospital within walking distance, that's all normal for them. Convenience stores down the street, So it's different.
Yeah, I think one of the ones that I kind of always chuckled at was, when we were on the field in Indonesia and we would have teachers very excited to do some kind of 4th of July celebration, and they'd want to have fireworks and hot dogs and hamburgers, and their kids would just spend the whole time looking at their parents like, these are just insane. Like this, they couldn't figure out why their kids weren't so excited about Independence Day.
Well, one thing we did for our kids.
There's a lot of things like that.
One thing we did for our kids to clue them into their background so it wouldn't be such a shock if and when they came back for university. We did a couple of things. One is we observed the American holidays every year, at least within our home. The national holidays, we put out the flag, we taught them the Pledge of Allegiance. Maybe they know the Star Spangled Banner. And we would go over the history of why that is important. Maybe pull up a YouTube video, or we had some select books. But we did that for religious holidays too. And we built a lot of traditions to pass on the faith. So, but that helped. Someone else taught us this. We had a little photo album with the faces of family and friends from back home. And from the time they were little, and probably evening devotions, we'd have a song, have a prayer, reading something. But at prayer time, we'd open the book to the next picture and we'd say, that's Grandma Susie. We're going to pray for Grandma Susie. And the next day, that's Grandpa Gordon, Grandma Priscilla, and we'd just flip through. And then every time we'd go back, because we'd get back about every other year, we would update the pictures. And we would, when they saw, when we were driving up, this is Grandma Susie, who we've been praying for. So, and then the age of Skype and everything, that made it a bit easier. For example, my daughters took piano lessons from my father via Skype. So they got to know their grandpa that way, and so little things like that, making it regular, it helped them have a stronger connection. Though they will tell you, coming back to the States for university had its rough spots. People don't talk the same. People assume that they are Americans and they look American. They're totally Caucasian in appearance, but they're like eggs, white on the outside, American eggs, white on the outside and yellow on the inside, and even attitudes and conversation and how loud you speak and how forcefully you speak, especially the political atmosphere in America. That was all like, what is all this weirdness? I don't like it kind of thing. Things they had to work through.
Yeah, that's certainly why I committed to my career to working with students in that transition to university is because it's, regardless of how well you prep for it, certainly if you don't prep for it, it's a nightmare. But even if you prep really well, there's still going to be surprises. And it's still, even if it's not a surprise, it still takes adjustment. And I think the biggest thing is for TCKs to know is that in that transition, they're not alone. They feel like they're the only one, but there's thousands of us. And 2, they'll get through it. And then 3, they just have to give it time. It just takes a little time.
Yeah.
And, you know, I've got classmates. I went to school in Kenya and I have classmates. It's now been well over 30 years and they're still in transition, right? They haven't really completed that transition cycle. One of the reasons, kind of the motivation to work with students now is to help them process and transition in less than 30 years. Kind of that's the goal.
Less than 30. Okay.
But I had a transition conversation with my sister this morning, and she hasn't been in Kenya for a very long time. She left when she was in 8th grade, and she's still dealing with some transition stuff. It can get mixed up in our faith and worldview, and there's a lot of stuff that gets mixed up in all that, and so it can be challenging. So I'm glad your daughters are doing well. Sounds like they're doing all right.
Well, they're figuring it out, and they got to find their own path through all that too. We don't all go at the same speed, that's for sure.
Oh, absolutely. But I think it's great. That idea of staying connected with family is really, really important. Even if politics and some of the social dynamics, even if all of that doesn't transfer from one generation to the next, that family is important to stay connected with. I think my parents, one of the reasons they left the field is my sister was disconnected from the family. She was so young when we went overseas, and we were pre-Skype and FaceTime, and so she didn't remember family members, and they would talk about cousin so-and-so or uncle so-and-so, and she just didn't know who that was. And my parents are like, no, family is really important to us. That extended family is a big deal, and we want her to have that. So I think that was a major impetus for them moving back to the U.S.
Yeah. Family is
so
really
is there
important.
anything kind of it's along the same veins, but is there something, if you could go back and talk to yourself in 97, 96, 97, when you're first arriving, do you have any advice for yourself that you wish you had known when you first started this journey?
Yeah, talking to myself. Well, for one thing, we were married 5 years and did not have kids when we moved to the field. And it was 5 more years after we moved before children came along. So we had a long time to settle ourselves on both sides of the ocean and into married life before kids came, and settled into the international school where I worked too. So I think telling myself what worked is take your time, And the transition is a repeated cycle. Even moving houses, changing your neighborhood, overseas is still a transition, because for the first 7 years we lived in apartments, and then after 1 year sabbatical we moved into a house on the street in a neighborhood. And it's very different when you look out a window and there's your neighbor across the fence who's complaining about how big your trees are. And it's very different, not in an apartment complex, in a home where there's vendors going by with their speakers blaring, selling things, and you're wondering, oh, wait, is this it's just a vendor. And so, just expecting, like, even now after 28 years there, like, my language isn't great because I work in an international school and it's English all day long. And even our Thai neighbors, I thought, oh, our kids are going to learn Thai. Well, no, our neighbors wanted to speak English. They wanted to practice their English. So none of us are fantastic Thai speakers, and my job doesn't demand it. And so just realizing that within each culture, there's subcultures, and the international community is a subculture all to itself. And it's not, we live in Thailand, but we work in the international community. And even though like 50% of our student body or so is Thai ethnicity, Thai citizenship, it's they're international folks too, and they want to learn English, and some of them are aimed on getting their kids to other places. So it's realizing that that's a subculture with its own set of rules, its own ways of doing things. And I had to learn, like, when I talk to like supporters, senders, friends and family, like, actually we're not missionaries to the Thai people. We're educators in the international community. Still a mission field. Still a very large unreached people group, but it's slightly a huge Thai flavor, of course, but it's its own entity.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It's interesting, I think, how similar that international community is more similar in Indonesia. The international expat community in Indonesia is more similar to the expat community in Thailand than it is to the Thai national. Like, it's just the international communities kind of transfer across borders, but the national experience can be very different. And you're often working with students whose parents are very much in national work and ministry. So they're having a very different experience than even
Yeah.
you're having. And
Yep.
yeah, there's probably infinite variables.
Mm,
Um,
mm.
and it's hard to, it's one of the reasons I like to have a lot of different stories. And as we started this channel, we want to have a lot of different voices, is because there's a lot of different experiences and a lot of different ways this is done. Now let's return to our conversation. Um, and you've been in that kind of that same community. You talk about that your kids grew up in the same house for a long time. What is it about the school community, about your work in that community, that has added to that longevity? Because a lot of people that work in international schools are kind of 3 and 4 year cycles, and maybe they go to they stay working in international schools for a long time, but they move schools and move countries. Kind of that part of it's exciting for them. Others just pour in, pour out, burn out, and then spend several more years in recovery somewhere. What do you think has contributed to your longevity at ICF?
Yeah, I know I'm an outlier, and they tell me that at church all the time, and at school. But actually, our school has a very high rate, very high average length of service. I think it's 7 or 8 years. Our leadership team, most of us on the leadership team, more than 10, 15
Yeah, that's
years.
very high.
2 of our founders, 35 years ago, 34 years ago, 2 of our founders still work with us. So our whole school is a bit unusual. I think part of that is timing. When our school opened in 1993, 3 years before we came, that was the very moment Thailand changed its laws and started allowing Thai citizens to attend international schools. And so up to that point, there were maybe 3 or 4 international schools, at least 3 or 4 that were really well known. And we opened the moment they allowed that, and our open doors with only K-8 offered, we had like 125 students right away. And we grew year on year. Almost every single year, enrollment just kept climbing and climbing. So that was an opportune time to give us fast growth. We're a mission-minded school, and I know lots of other international Christian schools, they are as well. Our administration will tell you, and we say it to each other all the time, the number one job we have is hiring. Hiring the right people makes all the difference. And so we hire very slowly. We start the process formally, typically as early as late October, early November, posting positions and stuff. If we know a position is open before that, we'll start even earlier. But people go through at least 2, if not 3, lengthy interviews. Part of that interview is having them read our school mission and vision and philosophy. Every one of our 14 subjects at school has a philosophy of education for that subject. We give it to them and say, hey, this is the ethos of the department. Are you comfortable working within these parameters? Because this was written by our teachers that you'll be working with. So hiring very, very carefully makes it easier to keep people because we're more certain they were a fit before they come, right?
Sure.
And then our school board, there was a pivotal moment when there was a financial crisis, 1997 in Southeast Asia. And our school board, without giving unnecessary details, they made a commitment to care for teachers and make sure they were cared for so that we could focus, on the ministry of teaching and worry less about survival and paying off school loans and retirement, things like that. It's not that they made us wealthy, but they wanted us to be able to put our attention on the reason we were there and be distracted as little as possible by financial things. And the school board made some big decisions, which you're probably familiar with the Good to Great book. There's a second book, and I can't remember the title, but the point of the second book was you think the customer is your number one priority, and actually the great companies make their employees the number one priority, because if they're happy to be working there, if they're enjoying their experience, then they're going to create an experience that's good for the customers. And I think that is what happens at our school.
Yeah. Wow. That's a big one for the new schools that are starting up. That's a wonderful lesson to keep the main thing, and your experience. I think you guys have evidence that taking care of the teachers, if that's the main thing, and you have good people, they'll take care of the students, they'll take care of the families. But those families and students cycle through. That's the way they go. And they don't carry the traditions that your teachers can. And that's a wonderful, and so many, especially some of the smaller schools that I hear where people are struggling, so many of them have board issues. So boards setting that tone and helping to make it take care of you guys is obviously, in your case, your evidence that was a good decision.
Yeah. And part of that too is the board's relationship with the administration. And our school for more than 20 years has followed the Carver policy governance model, which brings great clarity to relationships between board and school, clarifies who's responsible for what. That did wonders for us, and they've kept that strong. If you think it's hard to become a teacher at ICS through hiring, you should try being a board member. They put you through training and everything, and then they vote on whether they want you or not. It's really good. They're careful to guard the mission by guarding their own body of governance.
Yeah, I think that's really important. When our school switched to the Carver model for our board, it was transformative for us as an institution. It made all the difference. Yeah, it makes sense. And it's time tested, right? I mean, it's been around a long time, but it continues to be a really great model.
There's one other thing I would say makes a difference, and that is we have a peacemaking culture built into the school very deliberately. It wasn't always that way. And we still have conflict, but there was a transition time. When I went on sabbatical after 7 years, we were in the States for a year, and I was able to get training at a local church here in Salem Alliance Church, and they recommended and went on and I got training with the Institute for Christian Conciliation, part of Peacemaker Ministries. And so I got training in conflict resolution, conflict coaching, mediation and stuff. And like a month before we came back to Bangkok, the people that had been training me and teaching me, they took me in the office, they opened up the cupboards, they said, here, and they started grabbing curriculum, and back then VHS tapes and books, and say, take this with you to Bangkok. We want it to spread. And so when we came back, it took a year or two to get settled, but almost every year I've been teaching it at church, and we embedded it in the school. We've adopted the Young Peacemaker curriculum by Corlett Sandy in 5th grade. We now are at the point, all our admin team has seen that study and done some study together. And now we require all our teachers to watch the Resolving Everyday Conflict series, available on Right Now Media. If you've got that, a lot of churches have that now. Tremendous stuff. And we've taken some of those principles and embedded it right in our policy and practice about how we resolve conflict. It's like oil in the car, you got to change it regularly because it gets dirty after a while. All of our teams, all of our established teams have what we call group norms, and we ask them to refresh them every year. Our admin team reviews our own admin group norms. Every quarter, we go through some kind of exercise and we'll update them and tweak them. Sometimes we'll remind each other, hey, we're slipping up on this one. Let's try this better. And just makes such a difference to step back from all the decision making and talk about how you make decisions and how you resolve conflict. And I think that's huge in organizational health and the way people feel heard and valued.
Yeah. Yeah, tell me a little bit more about that. And I guess tell me about kind of how that's influenced your student culture. I mean, it
Mm.
makes sense in terms of
When
that
parents,
kind of, yeah. I mean, I've done the training too.
Mhm.
So I'm trying to leave the door open for you and not fill in the blanks myself. But it was easy to apply when we at Mountain View. It was easy to apply in our staff and kind of the adult setting, but I think we didn't necessarily get it great in terms of how we taught it, like how it was adopted into the student. I think the students experienced the benefits of it, but I don't know how well we passed it
Mhm.
on. And I'm just curious
Mm.
what kind of things you guys have done.
In our elementary and middle school for many years, we've had common discipline procedures through the whole divisions. And like in elementary, it's the 4 Bs, and one of them is be a problem solver. In other words, don't
Mm,
always run to the teacher every time you got a problem. Just stop and think.
yeah.
And they deliberately talk to the kids about that. Every chapel, there's a moment when they talk about 4B champions, like, oh, I caught somebody being a problem solver. I saw them do this and this. And within
Mm,
classrooms, they have routines and schedules. It's got to be built into classroom management. For example, I used to tell my fifth graders, like, hey, if you're stuck on a math problem, instead of everybody lining up saying, teacher, teacher, said the first thing you do is you lean over to your neighbor and say, can you give me a hint here? And if that doesn't work, then you turn to your square, say sat in groups of 4 and 5. Can you give me a hint?
hmm
If nobody can help you at that point, okay, teacher, teacher is fine. And building
Yeah.
that in not only for math problems, but when you have a conflict, someone's taking your pencil and they're being not very nice and they're not giving it back, appeal to them. In fifth grade, as part of the Young Peacemaker curriculum, we actually teach go through these steps to make an appeal, use I messages, things like that. And so building that into classrooms
Yeah.
and then modeling it. Also, it's very natural for the teacher when there's a moment that has interrupted your teaching. And I hate this, right? The natural thing for us teachers to do is shut it down, make a decision. You're the arbitrator, move on. I'm getting back to the lesson. And there are times you have to do that, but more effective is when there's time, pull the child aside and give them some coaching. Say, hey, I want you to go back to your fellow student and try this again, but try it with this kind of words. Try it with this tone of voice. And I'm really shortening a coaching session, but training yourself as a teacher to coach kids to work it out before they come to you is part of that culture setting too.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful, and what an amazing gift for students if they can graduate with those skills.
Mm-hmm.
The
Mm-hmm.
application in terms of how well they can flourish, not
Mm-hmm.
only in university but in their life after their marriages and families. And
Yes.
um, I mean that Peacemaker curriculum is amazing in terms of the
Yes.
tools that puts into people's toolboxes. That's tremendous. That's very exciting. I've talked to a bunch of schools, and this is the first one I've talked to that's integrating it, or at least that it's come up in the conversation. They may be integrated elsewhere, but
Yeah.
and I think that's probably a direct correlation to the longevity you guys are experiencing with your staff.
I think it has a high influence on that. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's been good. A couple stories, like we've had parents when they walk on campus to check us out, they can feel the difference just walking through the hallways, and they'll get to their
Mm.
first appointment with an admin or come to a parent preview day and they'll say, your students are so polite. What's going on? And we had
Uh,
a visiting team from another school, another international school, not a Christian school. The coach, though, was a Christian. She came and watched our team compete and said, I am applying to work here. And she did, and we hired her. The difference is quite noticeable
wow.
the first time. If you've been on other campuses, the first time you walk on campus, you can tell a difference.
Yeah, I haven't worked at a lot of different institutions, but I've been very blessed to work at institutions like that. I worked at a university that came out of that peace tradition, and it was very much, and it
Oh,
just created this whole different atmosphere. And like you said, parents would say there's something different here. I don't know what it is exactly. And those of us there weren't always great at articulating it either. We knew we liked it. Yeah, that's wonderful.
yeah. And
Really
I
amazing.
I do
So
think
tell me a
that's
little bit about, I know that you go ahead.
I think that's part of the brighter side of the international community. Those who are successful and able to navigate it, they tend to have a higher toleration for differences. They tend to be a bit more patient when there's a perceived offense, because that many, many things that come across as offensive is actually just something that was lost in translation. So just ask again, listen again, and it's usually not as bad as it first comes across. I think I think a lot of people in the international community build that sense the more they're here or there, wherever it is. I think the international community learns a lot of that, or at least builds a lot of the skills, because if you're going to work cross-culturally, you have to have a higher tolerance for ambiguity, a higher tolerance for perceived offenses, and a skill set of asking again and listening again, because I've found out so many things that could be conflicts or offensive or actually just things that were lost in translation, whether that's literal translation in languages or translation across cultures. For example, we were working with a family once from another culture, not even Thai culture, and they called us up one day and said, "Sister, you will take us to church." That's the way we heard it. But what we realized is, number one, their English wasn't that great, and they didn't know how to change the verb order in English sentences to make a question. And also, they're from a culture that is very, very direct, and Thailand is not that way. So at first, it struck us as quite offensive, but we just kind of like, no, sister, that we can't do that for you. And later, we actually had some language lessons about change the verb order so it sounds like a question. But that's just one example. There's many times.
Yeah.
It takes extra work to communicate and get through the differences there.
Yeah. We talk about TCKs and those with cross-cultural competencies being excellent bridge builders. And a large part, it's that ability to navigate conflict and even not have conflict, because you take the time to listen. And you pause and you assume the best in the person you're with, and you take it, okay, well, that came off to me as really mean, but if I take a minute, maybe you weren't trying to be mean. Let's figure out where you're coming from in this conversation. And just those taking the time to listen, like you said, taking the time to re-listen, ask for it to be stated in a new way. I mean, all those that are cross-cultural skills also are fantastic skills in dealing with other conflicts, whether they're political or in the church or wherever you're having problems, marriage, everywhere. Are there lessons that you've learned in your cross-cultural work that you think you wish everybody knew, that you think it would really help out kind of the world at large?
Yeah, I don't know if this is particularly cross-cultural as much as it is, you can learn this anywhere, but I learned it cross-culturally, and that is, don't lock people in to, like, we're all on a journey and people are still figuring themselves out and how they come across, how they work through life. And so, okay, here's the way that's helpful to me. When I'm in conflict with somebody and they're a believer, I will often say to myself, okay, Scott, the Holy Spirit that works as hard in you to get you to maturity and wisdom, and he's working in them too. Give him time. He's taking his time with you, Scott. Give him time too. And it's super helpful to realize, especially in conflict situations where often you'll have a moment and suddenly their attitude becomes the color and the paintbrush that you use to make their entire portrait out of. And it's just not fair. There's so much more to them than that one incident that really ticked you off. And so learning to see them as whole people with whole histories and not latching onto that one moment really gives people opportunity, gives yourself opportunity to know them better and then grow together.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's great. That's the wisdom for today. I think that's the big takeaway, whether you're coming in to do cross-cultural, you want to take a lesson away from those who've been in cross-cultural work and ministry. That's a fantastic wisdom. So glad to have had Scott on the show today. I try to leave all of these conversations kind of wishing that I had gone for another hour. I really appreciate you being willing to share your wisdom. I appreciate you sticking with us, and I appreciate folks who tuned in. We'll have some contact information for Scott. You can follow him on X at Scott in Bangkok, and we'll have some other contact information in the description. Scott, we thank you so much. Thank you for your service, for the longevity, the hundreds and hundreds of students who've been impacted by your willingness to share what you've learned in their lives. And the way that ripples out is really tremendous. And I know that you don't always get to see that when you're on the ground working with kids and they're growing up and moving on. But for those of us who are out here in the world and we're getting to experience the product of international schools, you guys are doing great work. I want to push my kids to come over and join you guys in ICS.
All right.
Because I would love my granddaughters to get to grow up in a school like that. So if you need a music teacher and whatever my son does, he married a music teacher. I hope at some point they get to put themselves into that
All right.
life experience. Scott, it's been a pleasure, and I thank you.
Thank you. It's been fun to talk. Should I call you Coach? Should have asked at the beginning.
No,
What's the
it
coach
doesn't
tag
matter.
about?